Welcome back. In this video, I'm going to cover the first half of the topic of survey research. In this video, I'm going to talk about how to write good survey questions so that you hopefully get accurate information from your participants. In the next video, I'm going to talk about how to get a good sample to take your survey so that you don't reach a biased conclusion about the population that you're studying. Like I said, in this video, we're going to talk about how to write good, clear survey questions so that participants aren't confused and so that participants give accurate information in return. When it comes to survey research, what you put in is what you get out. You can't expect to ask people confusing, poorly worded questions and expect to get accurate information back, because when you ask a person a confusing question and the person is confused, the person is either going to give up and not even bother answering that survey question, or the person is just going to take a guess at what you're looking for. And you don't want either of those things to happen. You want the person who's taking your survey to understand what they're being asked, and you want them to give an accurate, honest answer. Before we move forward, I want to give a real-life example of a situation in which a conversational question can be understood in more than one way, and how that can affect the answer that you get back from the person. So imagine you're in some situation and you see a friend and you ask your friend, "What did you do last night?" And imagine that your friend just stayed home and went on social media and watched movies on Netflix. If your friend thinks that you're asking them, "What did you do outside of the home last night?" or "What did you go out and do last night?" your friend is going to say, "I didn't do anything," because your friend is thinking, "Well, I just stayed home, so I didn't do anything." But if your friend thinks that you're just literally asking, "What did you do last night? What activities did you do?" and then your friend will say, "Well, I went on social media and I watched some movies on Netflix." And if you asked that question to 10 different people, it could be that a few of them think that you're asking, "What did you do outside of the home?" and the rest of them think, what did you do just in general?" And if that happens, then the answer that you get is going to vary depending on how the person understands the question. You're not going to get consistent answers, and that's going to affect your results. And you don't want that to happen. So it is very important to pay attention to how you're wording your survey question. So if what you really want to know is what did you do outside of the home last night, it would be better to say something more specific like, did you go out last night? And if the person says yes, then ask, where did you go out last night? And if you just want to know what did the person do in general last night, you might want to ask something like, what did you do last night, either at home or out of the home? So the person knows that you're just asking about what did you do in general. So yeah, the wording of survey questions definitely matters. And in this video, like I said, we're going to talk about how to write good survey questions. But first, I need to cover some more basic information. So we need to go over the definition of survey research and also the types of survey questions. So survey research is research in which people are asked to respond to a series of questions, either on a questionnaire or a verbal questionnaire, which would be an interview. And I need to be careful when I explain the definition of survey research, because in some types of experimental research, participants are asked to respond to a series of questions. You can do, a questionnaire could actually be part of an experimental study. For example, imagine that I wanted to know the effect of wall color on mood. And I have one group in a yellow room and another group in a white colored room. And then I give the participants a questionnaire that asks, how are you feeling right now in this room? And maybe a few other questions about their mood. Well, in that experiment, the participants are completing a questionnaire, but you wouldn't call that a survey study, because it's an experiment that just happens to be a questionnaire as the data collection method, or the tool that's used to gather the data. When I say that something is a survey study, what I mean is that the person is answering questions about personal topics, or personal topics that have to do with the person who's actually completing the survey. So if you give out a survey and you ask the person questions about their social media use, or their self-esteem, or their study habits, that would be a survey study, because the person is answering personal questions about his or her life. So that's what I mean about when I say survey research. So let's move forward and talk about the types of survey questions. So there are two main types of survey questions: a closed question and an open-ended question. A closed question is a question that asks a person to answer, to select an answer from a set of choices. A multiple choice question would be a closed question, because a person is choosing one answer from a set of possible choices. A Likert scale question on a 1 to 5 scale would be closed, because a person is choosing one answer from a set of choices. A true-false question would also be closed. The opposite is an open-ended question. An open-ended question allows a person to freely provide information. It allows a person to just express himself or herself, rather than choosing from a set of options. So an open-ended question could just be a fill-in-the-blank question in which a person just writes in 1 or 2 words. For example, if you ask a person, "What is your age?" and you have them fill in the blank, that's open-ended, because the person isn't choosing from a set of options. The person is just putting their age on the blank. If you ask a short answer question, like, "What do you like best about your university?" and the person is asked to write a sentence, that's open-ended. If you ask an essay question that requires a paragraph as an answer, that's also open-ended. So the length of the answer to an open-ended question will vary depending on the question. Some open-ended questions require short answers, some longer answers. And as a college student, you might have a preference for closed or open-ended exam questions. I believe that students in general typically like closed exam questions. At least that's what I've seen from my experience. So students prefer multiple choice and true-false questions, and they tend to dislike open-ended questions, like a question where you just fill in a blank with the correct answer, or an essay or short answer question, because those questions require a student to recall information without having any cue. When you have a multiple choice question, the answers are right in front of you, and all you have to do is choose the correct option. You don't have to recall information out of nowhere. But some students do prefer open-ended questions on exams. So let's quickly talk about the main advantage and disadvantage of closed questions, as well as the main advantage and disadvantage of open-ended questions. When you ask a closed question, you can perform calculations with the data. I think this is something we covered briefly in the last video. I mentioned that if you ask a closed multiple choice question, you can calculate the percentage of people who chose each answer. Also, if you ask closed questions about personality traits, you can calculate correlation coefficients. So that's the advantage of a closed question. But the disadvantage is you get less detailed information than you would get if you asked an open-ended question. So imagine I give out a survey to a certain number of San Jose State students, and I ask a closed question that says, "What do you like best about San Jose State?" And let's say the choices that I offer are A, the social life; B, the campus, the appearance of the campus; C, the support from professors; D, other. Well, when I get my answers back to that closed question, all I'm going to know is whether each person likes the professors, the support from the professors, whether they like the appearance of the campus, and whether they like the social life. And I'm not going to know any more detail beyond that. I'm just going to know some surface level information about my participants. But if I ask an open-ended question and I ask, what do you like about San Jose State? Please write a paragraph. I'm going to get much more detailed information that I would have missed with just the closed question. So that's the disadvantage of a closed question, is getting less detail. And let's now talk about the main advantage and disadvantage of open-ended questions. So I'm just going to take what I just said and flip it around. So the main advantage of an open-ended question is getting more detailed information, and the disadvantage is that calculations can't be performed with the survey answers unless content analysis is used. And that's what I'll be getting to content analysis in just a moment. When you ask an open-ended question and you get a detailed answer, like a sentence or a paragraph, you can't perform calculations with that type of data set. You can't just enter that information into a spreadsheet and calculate statistics like means, standard deviations, or anything like that. But if you use content analysis, what you can do is take those detailed answers and actually put them into categories, like 1 equals this type of answer, 2 equals this type of answer, and then you can do calculations with your code numbers. And that's what content analysis is. So now let's talk about content analysis in a little bit more detail. So if you're asking an open-ended question and you're getting detailed answers, you can do content analysis to convert those answers into categories or numbered code numbers that can be entered into a spreadsheet, and you can do calculations with that data. And this is often referred to as just coding, as a simple word. So imagine So if you're a psychologist and you're giving out a survey to the general public and you're asking a question like, do you think internal or external validity is more important in a research study? You're going to want to define those two terms so that the public knows what they're being asked. So those are my 4 guidelines for writing good survey questions. Let's now talk about some bad questions that need to be avoided. The first one is a double-barreled survey question. A double-barreled question is a question that asks 2 separate questions. It's 2 questions wrapped into one. An example might be, do you smoke and drink? Or do you eat healthy and exercise? Each of those is asking 2 separate questions. And if you ask a person a double-barreled question, the person might be unsure how to respond. For example, if you ask a person, do you eat healthy and exercise? The person might think, well, I eat healthy, but I don't exercise. So should I answer a yes or should I answer a no? So you want to avoid double-barreled questions. If you ever write a question and you notice that it's double-barreled, you want to split it into 2 separate questions. So instead of asking, do you eat healthy and exercise, ask one question that says, do you eat healthy? And another one that says, do you exercise? And it's possible for a question to be double-barreled, even if it doesn't include the word and inside of it. The first 2 examples I gave both had the word and, but a question can be double-barreled even if the word and doesn't appear anywhere in the question. And I'll share an example. Imagine I ask you, do you think San Jose State is a good, affordable campus? If I ask you that, how many questions am I asking you? I'm actually asking you 2 separate questions. I'm asking you, do you think San Jose State is a good campus? And I'm asking you, do you think San Jose State is an affordable campus? So I should break that into 2 separate questions so it's not double-barreled. Now imagine that I ask you, do you think San Jose State is a good, affordable campus with a diverse student population? Well, that's actually triple-barreled, and that would need to be broken into 3 separate questions. So you definitely want to avoid these types of questions to avoid confusion. You also want to avoid ambiguous questions. An ambiguous question is a question that can be understood in more than one way. Earlier in this video, I mentioned a question that says, what did you do last night? That question is actually ambiguous because it could be understood as, what did you do outside of the home last night? And it could be understood as just, what did you do in general last night? And since it has more than one possible meaning, it's ambiguous. So if you were trying to ask that question, you would want to phrase it in a more specific way so that it can only be understood in one way. Also, you want to define technical words if you're a member of a technical field. You don't want to include technical words without definitions. You also want to avoid value-laden questions. A value-laden question is a question that's worded in a way that makes one option seem more socially acceptable than another option. A value-laden question makes a person think, I'm a good person if I choose this option, and I'm a bad person if I choose this option. And you want to avoid that wording. So an example of a value-laden question might be, do you spend money selfishly? Yes or no? Some people might be reluctant to answer that honestly because they don't want to say I'm a selfish person because it might make them look bad or it might give off a bad impression. And a better way of wording that question would be, do you spend money on personal interests? A person would probably be more willing to agree to say yes to that. So if you see that you've asked a value-laden question, you want to try to word it more neutrally, in a more neutral way, so that people aren't afraid of answering and making a bad impression. So these are the 4 bad types of questions that you want to avoid. And let's see. So yeah, in the next part of this video, we'll talk about response styles and how there's more to it. There's more to writing, there's more to survey research than just writing good survey questions.